because I was a good Christian girl and I don't think I did enough drugs or got into enough trouble to
Oh,
have
you
a
didn't
problem.
have a good redemption story.
Right. Hello and welcome to Holy Ghosting Podcast, a podcast by 3 40-year-old moms who left the Evangelical Church. I'm Lindsay, senior warden at a very liberal Episcopal church in Portland, Oregon.
I'm Meg, and I am completely detached from American Christian evangelical culture, but I have no idea where to go from there.
And I'm Sarai, and I'm a witch, but I will tell you I'd reconvert in a heartbeat if someone gave me an altar call at a camp and then gave me a job at camp until I die.
Amen. Well, today we're talking about camp, baby. So we're going to launch into all the cringiest, wonderfulest, worshipiest moments of camp. We all grew up going to camp, at least us three ladies. I don't know about you listeners, but Christian camp is it's a whole thing. It's a vibe. If you haven't been, I don't know that you will fully understand. Like anyone who's been to Christian camp, it is different than other camps. It is not about dating. It's not even really about like crafts. Like some camps have like rope courses, those kinds of things, but it was about God. It was about your relationship with God and getting right with God, rededicating your life to God, so on and so forth. This was my camp experience. I'm an evangelical pastor's kid, and I frankly feel like I was born into camp. My dad was a youth pastor when I was younger. And in fact, so the story goes, he was leading like a high school camp the week before I was born. And in fact, my due date happened and he was at some camp in the mountains that had like, this is before I was born in 81. So this is before cell phones and all that. And so like my parents just prayed that I would be born late so that my dad wouldn't miss my birth, because God forbid he miss camp to be home with his very pregnant wife. So I was patient and I was born the day my dad got home from camp. It literally feels like my whole life has been camp. I remember going, my dad was a youth pastor. Sometimes we go as a family. I remember the camp we went to when we were younger. So I grew up in different parts of Northern California, but the one that we went to when I was young was called Heavenly Hills. And I remember my mom had this very classic 80s sweatshirt from Heavenly Hills camp. And she got so offended one time when a guy was like, looked at her sweatshirt as like in this 80s font written across her chest. And he was like, oh, Heavenly Hills, huh? And so that's why like the name of that camp is like burned into my brain. I think my mom,
that's gorgeous.
Yeah,
gorgeous.
She stopped.
So she didn't follow the rule of no, don't grow boobs.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. And she was like very embarrassed. So I think the sweatshirt was not worn after that point.
So what kind of camp did you go to? Was it a summer, winter? Like, was it the same time frame every year?
All of the above. But the one that is like burned into my brain is the week-long camp we would go to in high school, and youth groups from all around the Northern California area would converge. And of course it was like, there was cute new boys. There was like new people to make friends with. It was like, like I'd exhausted the resources of my own little youth group. So funny enough, my current priest, her husband and I went to church camp together.
What?
And
Stop it.
yeah, it's kind of wild, but I had a crush on him when I was like 15 years old, and we all had dinner together this week. I was trying to remember this camp that we went to, because as I recall, like our camp did not have a pool. There was not a lake. There was not a river. There wasn't a ropes course. Like literally,
I'm sorry, Lindsay. Let me just pause for a moment. Those are all places where bathing suits
correct, right,
would happen.
Yep.
So I get it. Yeah.
No bathing suits were happening. So I just remember there was like cabins that we stayed in. There was a lot of like Bible studies and worship. There were some games. Like I remember tug of war would happen. There's like a basketball court. I just remember like in between all the like required Bible study times, there was like some free time. I just remember kind of being bored and it was like dusty and we were in the woods, and like, and then, we'd all come together for dinner. And then after dinner was the big outside, they'd make a campfire. And that's when it was
the Holy Spirit,
it was worship time. It was altar call. It was testimony time. And that was like testimonies where I could still feel like the smell of that campfire. And it's funny, like in preparing for this episode, I kept getting the song. Do you guys remember As the Deer Panteth for the Water?
I love that song. Harmonizing around a campfire.
Because we weren't like a kumbaya camp. We were As the Deer Panteth for the Water camp. I do remember like one real, progressive thing our camp did is they would sing Help by the Beatles, but we were like singing it to God.
Obviously.
I love that. I
So
love that.
yeah. So, I mean, I got my first boyfriend at camp. We didn't kiss at camp because I was definitely not allowed. That happened later at a water park, but we lived close enough. And we were 15, so our parents had to like drive us to see each other. But I met him at camp. Like it was very formative for me. And it's interesting because I have, as we all do, very mixed feelings. Not even mixed, very strong feelings about evangelicalism. But I don't necessarily have those feelings about camp. While I view camp as pretty manipulative and intense, just like indoctrinating children, right? But it was also really fun and bonding. Did you guys have those experiences at camp? What's your top camp like memory off the top of your head? Like what's your quintessential camp experience?
Oh my God. I have so many of them. Do you have some, Meg, that are coming to you? Because if you
I do. Yeah.
Okay,
So
you go first.
when we were preparing for today, I was like, what's the thing about camp that I will not ever regret? I love camp for it. I want to have like the positive vibes. It's where I lusted after a boy for the first time. And that boy happens to be my husband.
Yes.
Hot.
So this is like my start to our story. He did not know I existed at camp. This was a summer camp and it was a denominational camp. And so kids from all these denominations from around Central California would go to this camp. And there was a boy from my rival town. And by rival town, I mean like high school football team rival. So when you go to church camp, you're obviously rivals with the youth group from the other town. Their boys are way cuter than the boys that live in my town.
Yeah.
So there were these brothers and they were so hot. I think I was either an 8th grader going into high school because it was a high school camp, or it was the summer after my freshman year. I was, I don't know, fresh-eyed, like naive. I was just like, yay, camp. And then we played mud pit tug of war. And oh boy. Whew, yeah. Wow. Okay. Mud pit tug of war meant, same with Lindsay, we did not have a pool. There was not swimsuit opportunities. There was no lake.
Do you remember what camp you went to?
No.
I know. I was trying to remember the other day. I think mine was Mount Hermit. Because I'm just wondering, I was like, did we go to the same camp?
I know.
Mount
I'm like,
Hermit.
did we
I'm
end
sorry, I
up at
didn't
the
mean to
same?
scream.
Did you go south? Because we went north.
Yeah, we went south. So maybe we ended up at the same weird tug of war,
Gosh,
no
wouldn't that be
pool
amazing?
Christian camp.
I literally wait. So can we pause for 1 second because
Yeah.
I do need to make this clear connection that the camp that I most loved is Mount Hermon. I worked at Ponderosa Lodge for 3 summers and literally loved every second of my life in Mount Hermon. So carry on, pause. I will come back to this conversation. It sounds like you were at Redwood Camp.
What?
Okay. I visited so many different ones throughout the years with our family that I just can't remember the name of the one that was like the high school camp that I went to.
I remember going to Sugar Pine for winter camp because it would sometimes snow. Like we didn't always get snow at winter camp. But I cannot remember the summer camp place because it was different. We went different places.
My roommate in college, it was from Big Bear, California, like the mountains of Southern California. And she wrote me into being a camp counselor for like a weekend or something like that. And we went and it's like on this gorgeous lake and they have all these fun water activities and like this really epic camp. And I was like, oh, I did not know that it could be like this. I was like, this is good. Like, this is a fun place to go.
I think a lot of people in California did end up going to Hume.
Yes.
Lake.
Yes.
And that's I don't know, I considered it bougie. It was like more expensive.
Yeah. Which is why I think
they
we
had
never
all
went.
of the stuff you could
legendary. Do. Yeah. Yeah.
And families go there. And I mean, I knew families that like they would take their summer trips and get a cabin at Hume Lake. And, because it was open, it wasn't just youth groups. But I did not go to Hume Lake. We did not have water sports of any kind, but we did have mud pit tug of war. They also played volleyball in this pit. Like apparently mud pits were the only option.
Which is funny because like it is kind of sexy, like inherently, right?
Oh my God. Adults planned this. So like the Jello pit, like girls wrestling in a pit that has stuff in it.
Did that happen at your camp? That did not happen.
No, but I'm just saying that's like a weird adult fantasy that like teenage girls are like muddy and
right. Yeah.
I don't know. You think of like the counselors there, and no offense, Sarai, but these 20-something-year-olds who didn't have other jobs, but their jobs were like, let's be around mud pit tug of war teenagers. There were a lot of like 20-something-year-old guys that were counselors,
Oh yeah, and all the campers had crushes on them.
right? Because they were all like hot 20-something, and you're a teenager, and
Yeah. I mean, Sarai, you could probably speak to this more, but it's like that camp mindset. Like it's a culture that you buy into. I don't even necessarily think it's creepy. I don't think that they're there to like hit on young campers. It's literally just you buy into the entire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
speaking from
someone is
experience,
there for the wrong reasons.
oh,
A
it's
lot.
not so much 20-somethings macking on like teenage girls. It's all of the counselors always finding ways to have crushes on each other, hook up or whatever. Not P&V hookup necessarily, although that probably happens sometimes. And
Not down
you know,
here. Scandalous.
no touching. But yeah, definitely counselors are like all of my camp memories from working there in my 20s are not about like, oh, I had this wonderful connection with my cabin. And I did. I mean, I have a great deal of those kinds of memories, but the main things I think about are like just the friends I had, and we're all still largely still connected and, you know, ping each other through Facebook Messenger now and then and things like that. So kind of a funny thing, but I just will tell you that counselors are more into counselors that I knew, the ones I knew. That said, there was a guy from Germany who worked at my camp the first summer I was there. And the rumor was he was asked to leave because he was like totally hitting on teenage girls. And so
Bingo.
they're like, oh, bye-bye.
Yeah, I called it.
We
There's always
know.
one creep.
Hey,
Yeah.
at least they let him go and didn't cover it up. I mean, I'll give them
Yeah.
that. That's like
I think they probably covered it up and let him go, but like whatever.
I wouldn't
Didn't
know
wanna-
if they were covering it up. I mean, they didn't tell the high schoolers that shit.
Right.
Like,
Right?
they didn't
weren't
know.
like, there was this dangerous person here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we would get a new batch of campers every week. So, you know, the memory was short.
You like
on the camper
lived
side.
there.
Yeah. So can I just start at the very beginning because it's
I
a
would
very
love
good place
that.
to start. But the first year I went to camp was when I was going into 5th grade, and the Oregon Conference of the Free Methodist Church for a while was renting out this camp called Camp Kilowan. And it was a Girl Scout camp. You know, it was rustic but nice, and we had like great cabins, and we did a lot of gimping. Did anyone else do gimping?
Mm-mm.
It's that
no
thing
idea
where
what
there's
that
like
is.
those long flattish pieces of plastic that are like kind of ropey, and then you fold them together and you make like keychains. I'll find a picture. I'll show you.
Yeah, like
I'll send it to
friendship
you guys later.
bracelet, keychain.
I did-
That was called gimping.
Oh,
Yeah.
I did like lanyard making.
Yeah.
Or whatever, but I
You
don't.
were probably more politically correct. We just called it gimping. I don't know why it was called that.
Yeah, no
Kind
idea.
of
With
a
the,
weird
with the
one.
thin, it was like flat plastic that
Yeah, definitely crafted with
definitely crafted. Did
sure.
not have an ableist name for it though.
Did you make
Wow.
the salvation bracelets too? I remember those
Mhm.
with the beads, like black for sin, red for
Yeah.
blood. You know, like there was like 5
Can we
colors.
make these? I would
Yeah,
love this.
I'm gonna make
Let's
these
do it.
for
But we need to rename each of the color beads
Mhm.
for like not you're going to hell reasons.
I vote we rewrite the entire Petra song that basically is based on those bracelets. It sounds like
right, the color
red
song.
is the color of the blood that flows from
Okay,
your
which came first, the Petra
vagina
song or
when
the
you have
salvation
your
bracelet?
period. What?
Red is for menstrual blood.
Exactly.
Oh,
That's right. Okay, we'll
Where we
rewrite
shun
it
the
as a
women
feminist
Side of the
anthem.
village.
That's gonna be the name of a future episode. Red
Yeah.
is for menstrual blood.
Oh my God. I would love to talk a lot about periods because the first time I ever got my period was at camp also. So 5th grade,
Oh.
I was like, I didn't go when I was going into 4th grade, which I could have done, but I was like, none of my friends will be there. And then I went in 5th grade and I literally was like, how has this been kept from me this whole time? Like camp was absolutely my natural habitat. So I was stoked on it. I loved camp like obsessively. So a couple of things that were common themes there were that like we had very strict segregation between like the boys side and the girls side. So if you ever went to the boys side, you would be executed. Girl cabins were over here, boy cabins were over
same.
there. And yeah, it was near the twain shall they meet. And then by the time I was going into 7th grade, I was really mad because the way that they used to do middle school camp was they would all go to this place called Drift Creek, but we got real cheap and somehow always ended up going to this other camp in Southern Oregon in Glendale called Fur Point. And in Fur Point, it was way dusty. It was like red dust too. So your shoes would get ruined. And the dust was, I liked it. I liked being grubby and dirty. I was like very much a, let's go to literally like go live in the dirt for a week and not clean ourselves unless we're in the pool.
Oh my gosh. I specifically remember like waiting in line for like a shower because there was only a couple of them and like,
Well, you were there for the boys.
yes, trying to get my situation. I remember because it was
Right.
like the 90s. I remember having my white eyeliner and like, yeah.
You were so cool in the 90s. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with curly hair. I was more like Sarai. Like, I just was fine being the dirt. I mean, one of my best camp stories that my friends still talk about is when I killed a rattlesnake outside of the girls' cabins.
What?
That was badass, my friend.
Seriously.
Everyone was screaming, and my biggest fear is snakes. And I have been doing things my whole life to try to like, exposure and like get over it.
It's called Indiana
But these
Jonesing.
girls, they're like, get a boy. And I was like, we're not helpless. Like there's a rock right here.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I just went and took these giant rocks and like trapped it.
Dude, I cannot.
And then I chopped its head off.
Meg, you are a warrior.
And
at
the time, someone had run to get a boy.
Okay.
And the boy came and he was like, not sure it's dead. Cause I didn't like chop its head off. I just like kind of smashed it.
When you chop their head off, they still move.
Like I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I was like 14 or 15 or something. But this guy came with a shovel and he chopped the head off. And then he chopped the tail off and he like picked up the tail to like put it in his pocket. And all these girls were like, no, sir, she is the one that killed it. Give her the rattle. She gets to walk around. And I was really shy, but my friends made me wear it like on the outside of my pants. Like you could hear it.
Wow. Okay. That's like,
That is amazing.
So I was infamous. No one knew my name.
Did we turn that into was that like used as a sermon illustration about like the devil or anything? Because that feels like a real missed opportunity, if not.
Like a real life David and Goliath story, but with a girl and a rattlesnake.
Yeah.
But with a girl and a rattlesnake. Well, it was about a girl. So.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So that's
okay.
We weren't going to glorify it.
Right.
I forgot. That was a crazy question.
No, I was the rattlesnake girl and no one knew my name.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, well, that's fine.
Yeah. I want to talk about testimonies because that was a real problem for me because I was a good Christian girl and I don't think I did enough drugs or got into enough trouble to have
you didn't have a good redemption story.
Right. And so it was like every night, people come down and they were telling their stories about getting saved. And I was just like, well, my dad's a pastor and I was literally born into this. So that was one thing where I always felt like weirdly left out. Like I think I had a little bit of persecution complex about it. Like my life has been too charmed. And so I don't have anything to say. And it was decidedly not cool to go down there and just be like, I've lived a good life and I love the Lord.
You had no Job story.
No. Did you guys, do you remember that? Did you have that feeling?
Well, wait, first off, back up. Did you do these? You said you did these like every night after dinner, like evening service.
It's like the more quiet, contemplative worship. And I feel like the daytime there was funny skits and stuff, but at night it was like, it was time to get real, to get right with the Lord. And there were some altar calls too, but it was like, I think it started with testimonies. It was like people came down to share their stories. And in fact, also I feel like this is my craziest camp story. So I have this very distinct memory of this girl one year. Let's call her Maddie. It's not her real name. I hadn't met her at camp before. I was from a different youth group. She goes down and she tells this really intense story. It was like about her mom committing suicide. And it was like a lot. And she was crying and we all surrounded her and we prayed over her. And then she kind of became thick as thieves with our youth group for us. We like brought her into the fold and we were like, hanging.
Oh, was she from a different church?
Mm-hmm. We didn't know her, but it was like, we're going to accept you. Come to find out, end of the week, she had made it all up. She lied. And I can't remember. It was like some other kid, like from her youth group, was like, that's not, like none of it was true.
Like her mom's alive and well?
Yeah, something, or maybe she just like lives with her dad or parents had separated or something, and we were so upset. I mean, I remember it was a scandal. It was a big deal. And I was just like, we have been betrayed. So, we turned so quickly on her and we, there was like a confrontation, but it was mostly just like, get out. You are not my friend anymore. You are a liar. How dare you abuse the testimony? And looking back, I actually have some guilt about it because I'm like, this entire system is set up to make you feel loved and accepted for having a really gnarly story.
Mm,
And
the
I'm sure
redemption
that
is better. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm sure that girl just wanted attention and she wanted love and she wanted acceptance, and modeled night after night for her is people doing the same, coming up with wilder stories or about whatever. Maddie, wherever you are, I feel bad. I didn't even know her last name. You know, I know her first name. There's no way to find her. And who knows? Like lying isn't cool. Like I don't think like doing that wasn't the
Right,
right
but why did she lie?
thing.
Like, what was happening in her life that she needed that kind of support and couldn't talk about the thing?
Right, and it just makes me think back to those times and just, like, the sheer pressure that was being put on children to be a certain way and to have these stories, and, like, it's like the further you fall, you know,
Mm,
the
Oh,
farther you're
yeah.
lifted up, and so it's this glory, you know, God can redeem anything, and while there it can be some beauty to that, to only have that be the thing modeled night after night, it really clearly messed with some people, so
If I may,
yeah.
I think one of the big reasons for that is a central point of evangelical Christianity that has made all of us suffer is the glorification of suffering. The
Mm,
idea that to be a good person or to be a good Christian, that suffering is not just a part of it, but it's required, or that suffering makes us better, that we're earning jewels in our crown
mm,
for heaven. And that is what the really a huge central focus of evangelical Christianity is suffer now and then go to heaven and it'll be okay. I mean, to me, I suspect a lot of that is about making it okay to be poor or sick or, you know, with a disability or whatever it might be in your current life, and not about how do we help people make a better life here, but rather
mm,
why don't we wait until heaven? And
mm.
so suffering is
mm.
good. And that's one. I would also argue that, I mean, sorry, now I'm arguing. Wow. Oh man. I mean, I'm just thinking, I think another big part of that too is a reason why evangelicals and Republicans mix well, is that they're not necessarily like, let's make better public policy that helps more people. They're like, yeah, but suffering is important and necessary. And also, these people don't deserve anything because they're sinners. Why should my tax dollars go to pay for somebody? They should go to church and get saved. Then they'll be worthy of help. I mean, to me, that's probably a big reason why those testimonies are like a reflection of the kind of suffering that we reward and want people to experience, and or we want ourselves to experience and subject ourselves to that as a part of that whole framework.
And I also think that evangelicalism chases the high
Mm.
of the community, the like God saved us from this stuff. And so I think it's like the testimony, like the darker it is, the higher the high of like, but we have overcome, God fixed it. We're good, you know. And so I think that like the thing about camp was the high, right? And that
Oh
it
yeah.
was addictive. It was
Yeah.
like that's why we kept going back because like the feelings you felt of like, I'm not a crier, like Meg knows this. I like I don't cry a whole lot. It's
You don't hug, you don't cry, we love you.
it's
But at camp,
my
you're
defense,
just like,
but I could
hey.
never let it all go. It was what you're supposed
Yeah.
you wanted to feel those feelings and it was rewarded. If you weren't feeling those feelings, there was something wrong with you and you weren't letting the Lord in.
The vulnerability that happened at camp. I mean, I remember my brother and I had a very cathartic camp altar session together because our parents had gotten divorced. We didn't go to counseling, which I've talked about. There was no mourning the loss of our nuclear family, never happened, but it happened for us at an altar call at a church camp. And we cried together. Like he held me, I held him. It is one of the most bonding moments, I
Mm,
think, probably of our life. And I don't know if we would have had it if we had not had the freedom to be vulnerable. Seeing my brother cry,
mm,
I mean, thinking about it makes me well up because he just, he was caught into this misogynistic worldview that just said men don't cry, men don't have emotions, you're strong, you're the man of the house now. And he was a fucking kid. I appreciate the vulnerability that happens. I think when you're amongst your peers, yes, there's adults there, but the kids totally outweigh that. We're all there for kind of like the same reason, I guess.
Yeah.
And we allow that vulnerability to happen during an altar call or like at camp.
I was thinking about this in relationship to the mental health episode and where we talked about altar calls and this sort of give and take that we didn't have in those, where it's just like people are doing their best to guess. They're like kind of coming up, they're supporting you, you're crying. They're like, whatever, we're not going to ask you questions about this. But there is a different thing that happens at camp because you're away from everything. You're in a place where you're kind of just having fun. You're allowed to be a kid or whoever you are. Like camp was so great for me because I was just a weirdo and I loved doing stupid stuff just to do it. And like, it was fun and hilarious and it was great. But like that whole part, I also probably extra liked it because I wasn't around my peers that much because I was homeschooled. But the way that is different is like this testimony piece and this sort of catharsis piece. We did not have therapy. We didn't believe in it or whatever, but camp in a lot of ways is just inherently therapeutic because you're away
Like 1
from
week a
your
year,
life.
you get
Yeah,
to
it's like
go
group
to therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not,
And that,
not the best therapy, not therapy that actually helps you.
oh
Like
no.
that's the thing that's so interesting about a lot of our young experiences in evangelicalism. Like there are good things to it. There are some underlying, like Meg, you're saying, like something really beautiful came of that. And the vulnerability piece, I think when I was younger, is the only time where I really felt free to be vulnerable and to cry and to appear weak. Cause I always was like, I have to appear strong. Everyone in the world was like crumbling around me and I had to be strong for everybody else. And that was just sort of the way I got through. But yeah, camp felt different. And I have really mixed feelings and I have some very positive feelings. And I made some really good friends. And it was fun, like, especially because my dad was like, he was like Mr. Camp. He would go to the high school camp that I would go to. It wasn't like I was escaping my parents for
Oh,
a
yeah,
week,
that's a totally different
but he
vibe,
was
yeah.
like cool. Like my dad was funny and everyone at camp. So in some ways I was like Greg Stranigan's daughter. Like
Yeah.
I was cool by default because my dad was cool and he led all the funniest skits or whatever. Like he was like the king of camp. And so it was funny because it was like, I feel like a lot of people escape their parents for a week. And I do remember I had a little bit of like, oh, I just want to be known for me. I don't want to be known for my dad, which was really fun.
I mean, I was known as John's little sister, so
Yeah.
we all
It's
have
funny
our things.
looking back, some of my best memories with my dad were pretty different in some ways. And like, I love him. We're really similar in some ways in our very left-brained logicalness. But yeah, I have good memories. That girl and the lying. And I think about it. I think about it a lot and how we just pushed people to be vulnerable to a point that it was too much. If you just had a normal story, that wasn't valuable and that wasn't cool and it wasn't worth talking about.
Well, and asking a teenager to be vulnerable in front of other teenagers
Mhm.
without counseling or with therapy or somebody who knows how to help you navigate that. For me, having public speaking anxiety, that was a whole other thing to overcome. But then you're just being vulnerable in front of like sometimes hundreds of people.
And there's no
And then you're going to go
follow-up.
to
There's
breakfast
no
with them the
right.
next morning.
Totally.
Like it's weird.
Yeah. I don't know how many people are going to listen that haven't been to Christian camp, but it was centered around these things and it was like built and designed to make you break down barriers and leave it all behind. And we're going to be radical for the Lord and everything.
Right. And when you leave it at the altar,
Mhm.
you're literally not supposed to talk about it anywhere else. Like
Well,
it's just like
but
we're
then it's
done.
weird. I feel like you have the nighttime, especially. It's building to this nighttime, crying, the soaring worship music, the fire, but then you like get up the next morning and you're playing like weird eating games and like hitting your tables with your forks in the mess
Yes.
hall. Camp was such a weird because it was very silly. Like I remember being like all the weird eating, like you make the counselors like drink some weird sludge of like where everyone. I remember at our camp it was like where people would scrape their plates like. You like some
Oh,
like youth
do
pastor
not
would have
say
like,
what I think you're gonna say.
right, something disgusting. I just remember there was a lot of disgusting food stuff.
Yeah,
And
the guys in our camps were like one-upping each other in the
yeah,
gross
so
level.
many
Yeah.
weird food. So it was like weird food dares and like watching your youth pastors like barf at lunch hour. And then at night, we're all just like weeping and holding each other. So you guys, if you didn't go, you really missed out. I'm just gonna say, if you went to a cool camp where you gotta like do ropes courses and like kiss people of the opposite or same sex, that was not
That was
real
not you
fun.
guys missed out.
You were like indulging in the flesh and you were not getting right with the Lord and like reading your Bible and like looking over at the cute boy who then did become my boyfriend, Brian Mercer. We were 15. He had braces. We didn't kiss at camp though. We waited until we went on a youth group trip to a water park. So
Whoa.
first kiss.
Where you were wearing the bathing suit.
Heck yes, I was wearing a bathing suit. Two-piece at that. It
Whoa.
was a very
Wow.
modest, peaceful two-piece.
Sarai, did you ever have a two-piece as a teenager?
Bitch, no, are you kidding me?
No,
Not even
me
as an
either.
adult.
Mm-mm.
It's a hilarious culture shock thing that I spent so much time at camps and things like camps, and on purpose, and I loved doing that. And one of the times I was at camp, I fell in love for the very first time, like for real, but I'd already been engaged 2 times. And my second fiance, who I'd just broken up with right before we went to camp to be like the camp band and get paid money to be at Ponderosa Lodge for a whole summer, was like amazing. But he was there, so it was kind of awkward while I fell in love with somebody else in front of him. That person and I went to a lot of places. A funny thing about growing up in Oregon, all of our camps, and in my conference, my Free Methodist kind of world, it was always super modest one-piece bathing suits were allowed. For a point, there were 2 consecutive years where someone pooped in the pool, and then we never could use it again for the whole week. So there was no bathing suit happening there. I love wearing bathing suits now because I'm like, let's just do this. Who fucking cares? Sorry, I swear too much. No, why am I saying sorry? Okay, keeping on.
Don't apologize. This is a safe curse word space.
It is. Everywhere that is in my heart is a curse word space. So I went from that experience of like most of the girls would be like wearing a giant t-shirt over your bathing suit. And of course,
that
like,
was the holy way to do it.
It is. That's how you live your
and then it gets
beautiful
wet
life
and like
a witness.
sticks to your body, and like the whole thing that you're trying to hide.
Pointless. You're not doing a good job.
I never thought of it that way, so I didn't have the awareness to recognize it didn't matter at all that I was wearing it. And it was actually just making things more uncomfortable, and I stayed cold forever. That was annoying.
It's so hard to swim.
I can feel that wet. I hate. Yeah. Nope.
Yeah.
How many times I wore a t-shirt in the water is absurd.
Yeah. Or even shorts too. Like what in the world? Yeah. Don't wear the t-shirt, even if you didn't follow our earlier advice and grew boobs anyway.
Yeah.
So
sorry if you have boobs. I have a daughter who's 7. She doesn't have them yet. Whatever. I'm going to raise you to be like proud of them. They're on your body and they're yours, and
they're yours. You do you.
Yeah. And let's learn about bras and how to size them correctly earlier in your life.
And let's make breast reductions more affordable and available to whoever would like one.
Let's make this a breast reduction advocacy podcast, because that is where I'm at as a person.
Yeah. As
so
a person who has had one, I've got the tiny titties now, y'all. If you're thinking about it, holler at me. I cannot recommend it enough. Change my life.
Sarai and I are not jealous at all.
Well, we were the big boob Christian ladies club, and that is not a fun club.
Not a fun club.
Like, I'm dangerous. And if you love your boobs and you want them, great. They cause me great amounts of back pain and headaches and clothing disasters. And also, of course, in the younger years, the fights that my mother and I would have about swimsuits and clothing were just insane, which is why we went to camps that didn't allow.
That's right. Oh, I have to say this culture shock part. My first camp experience outside of Oregon, besides like Kansas area, like Midwest camps, I actually spent my whole summer the first year I was in college driving around to different camps and being a counselor at random places and being a part of the band for a couple of years. The culture shock was going into California and seeing that the rules for campers were you could wear basically whatever swimsuit you wanted to. So I would be a counselor in a cabin and a girl would be wearing a bikini and it was fine. Like all the campers could do that. The counselors had to wear one pieces that were modest, which I think is also interesting. But even just the fact that all these young women were running around in bikinis and it was fine was shocking.
Yeah, that would have
I could not believe it. I was like, California, whatever. You're crazy.
What a time to be alive. I know we're raising our kids different. And, my kid the other day said something to me about, are there churches that don't like gay people? That doesn't make sense to me, Mom. She's like, you know how gays and theys go to our church? I'm like, yeah. She's like, but other churches don't like them. And it's like blowing her mind. And I'm like, so grateful for the next generation. That my hope and prayer is that they don't have to deal with the things. We have the mixed feelings about camp. There were good things that came of it. But ultimately, like looking back, it was manipulative. And it was icky. It was trying to create this generation of like on fire for the Lord kids. And I don't know that it really succeeded in that.
But it did succeed in a lot of makeout sessions. I will say that.
Yeah. And lusting after boy. And I mean, Meg got a husband out of the deal. So,
I'm fine with it.
Great.
Yeah. So praise the Lord for camp. As always, I love talking to you ladies. Hit us with your camp stories. Give me your testimony, people. I want to hear some testimonies. I want to hear, don't make them up. They got to be true. And if you do make it up, I won't judge you. I promise. I've grown a little.
I want to just go on the record to say I am 100% still in favor of camp, even though it's manipulative, because in the end, it was just really, really fun.
Go to camp for fun, not for the
Yeah.
Lord. That's my advice.
That's right. Go for you.
This has been conflicted ladies who are working our way through the bizarre experiences of evangelical childhood. It's been lovely talking to you both. It's been fun going down the camp road and talking about these weird times being weird Christian kids. And with that, we're out.
This has been Holy Ghosting. Holy Ghosting is a Same Team Media production. Music by Weep Bar. AP Weber produced the show. We'd like to give a special thanks to Meredith Hawley and Eris Conflict Resolution for consulting with us about our stories. If you have a story of abuse and you're worried about telling it publicly, they're available to help you tell your story in a way that keeps you safe. Find them at erisresolution.com. Thanks for joining us. And if you miss us in between shows, you can find us on socials, posting almost every day at Holy Ghosting Pod, Instagram and TikTok.